I'll stand for the intro bit, and then I'll sit down again.
You can
sit down
as well. Let's not make it awkward.
Since it's a more don't clap on your own or we'll throw a fish. And since it's a more intimate crowd, I can actually open with a joke I wasn't going to tell, which is you'll notice that Catherine isn't Peter Molyneux. Plan A for this speech was I was going to host Peter Molyneux on the stage, and he dropped out at the last minute due to scheduling challenges. And I think if Peter was here, the main advice he'd give is be Peter Molyneux in 1982 when he got started. But the next best time is now. And I decided to talk to my friend Catherine to replace a Peter Molyneux speech with a speech about communications. If you talk to people, they'll say their biggest problem is discovery and getting the game out there. And this is a theme that I hear a lot. I'll tell you my background, then I'll Catherine introduce hers, and then I'll open with my first question. My name's James Binns. I'm a games industry media veteran. I've been at over 32 years, and the only thing you can tell by someone who's been in the media for 32 years is I'm the survivor. So you can take that. Currently, I'm chairman of a business called Network N Group. We make websites about video games, which include sites like PC Games N and Pocket Tactics. Pocket Tactics is the world's biggest mobile game site. PC Games is the number 2 PC gaming site. So we did pretty good. And we also have an agency where we help people with communications. Our clients include people like Play On, historically Amazon, some work for Epic, a bunch of other people. We help build communities and create video, stuff like that. We're very good at Discord. Introducing Catherine, tell us about yourself.
Hi, nice to meet you. I'm not Peter Molyneux. I'm okay with that, though. Let's hope the rest of the room is. So I've worked in video games for the last 30 years. I originally started in trade marketing in the launch of PlayStation 1 and pre-Nintendo 64. I moved into retail and worked on a whole bunch of different games before I moved into communications and media. So I worked at Feature Publishing for a number of years, where I worked on brands like PC Gamer, Edge, Official PlayStation. I also worked at the BBC and Sky. Unfortunately, back then, games media were paid terribly and looked like PR people were having a great time. So I moved into communications. That's been my life really for about the last 25 years. I've worked on a lot of big launches. I have worked on a number of different corporate communications efforts as well. So I was at Vivendi during the acquisition and creation of Activision Blizzard. Also worked at Take-Two through Vice City. More recently, I was heading up global corporate communications at Electronic Arts. So looking at their investor, executive, corporate employee studio communications, as well as looking after all of their games and sports portfolio in international markets. So that's everywhere outside of America, and dealing with brand and product communications. And I currently work as a communications consultant, and I work with lots of different types of businesses and service providers, from small startup studios, indie game launches, to big AAA live services, as well as some executives that I support through investment rounds and founders.
So I love doing these kind of round tables. It's actually a fireside chat, but there's no fire.
Can we sit
generally,
down yet?
Yeah, I think we're going to sit down. Okay. I'm going to relax and sit low. Generally, we win on these if any of you write down anything that you do as a consequence of it. All right. So if you change your behaviour at all, we've won. One tip is enough for your hour of time. We'll take questions at the end. I've got 5 pre-prepared questions that Catherine has seen, but we'll also move on to some other ones. When I'm in trouble, it's a better call situation. When we make a mistake in our media, generally Kat is the person that I ring if we've made a terrible faux pas or about to get sued. And Kat always says the same thing to me. What do you always say to me, Kat?
Don't say anything. Shut up. That's basically it.
Which is going to make quite a short presentation. Why do you say that?
One of the things that we see a lot of people doing generally in communications is being quite reactive. So even if you are a one-person micro studio or you are a massive AAA, the urge to respond to something that might feel like an injustice or an inaccuracy without taking a moment to think, it's a natural human reaction. The problem is that when you do that, you're most likely to come back with an emotional response rather than thinking through all the different scenarios that could be the reactions to that response, or all the different stakeholders, including your own people, who might have a view on what you do or don't say. So my first point of call is generally don't say anything until I've had a chance to have a look at this. And then it's really think about that, what you're going to say and what it is you're trying to achieve in what you're saying. One of the foundational pillars of my approach to communications is start with the truth. And 9 out of 10 times, if you are not comfortable with telling anybody the truth, inside or outside of your company, you should really be asking yourself if you should say anything at all. Because leading with a lie is never a good idea.
You'll always get caught. Also, people like me from the press, the media, we love it if people are dumb enough to make a comment. Just keeps the story going, another news cycle. Right, so that's your number one takeaway is don't say anything. Right,
well, I think it's think before you speak, right? And think about the consequences.
Also, what's interesting on it is you're not actually obliged to say anything. Just because it's a member of the press or something like that, there's no legal compulsion to make a statement, right?
And a lot of the time, a lot of the work we do in communications is thinking through a whole world of scenarios. It's like you see the tip of the iceberg if you ever work with a comms person or a PR agency. And beneath them, there's a whole bunch of work that goes into potentially doing nothing or giving a really, really short statement. But yeah, you have to think about if you think about any kind of rumor or story, either in your company, around your company, or within your gaming community, it needs oxygen, right? It needs fueling, either by somebody agitated inside or out. And if you add something to that, you are essentially pouring petrol on the tinder that's on fire. So think about whether this is something you want to fuel. And fueling it might be a good idea if you then end up getting your position out there and you are owning the story and you are increasing the accuracy. But sometimes it's best to leave alone and let things die out.
One of the things as a media owner we get an awful lot of spam and getting from games companies asking us to cover their game. And I'd like you to talk on the best way to get a journalist's attention to cover a game. I think this idea of discovery and getting any media involved, or an influencer, a creator, journalist, what would you say is the core strategy for building that?
I think the core strategy is kind of constant across community, influencers, social, or media. It's like find a friend. And one good friend is worth their absolute weight in gold. And that's been consistent in the last 30 years. You just need one person, right? If you are, it's much like life. You could have 30 people's phone numbers who you might raise a flag to in a moment of crisis in your life. But if you are nothing to any of them, then the chances of them responding is pretty slim. But if you have one really good friend, so if you have one journalist contact that you've established and you've nurtured, it can be worth its weight in gold. And no matter what the size of your business, no matter what area you are in the games industry, finding a friend in media, finding someone who might already be following your social feeds, might at some point have written about you or about your someone else in your leadership team, or might have written about games that are similar to yours or services that are similar to yours. Find a friend, nurture that relationship, and nurture it by showing an interest in what they're interested in their audience, in what they're writing about, and how they're talking about you and the business around you.
And I'm going to slag off press releases. A press release is the worst possible thing you can do to get a journalist to cover your game or get press. Now, I'm going to describe why in a way that actually works for you, right? If you look at your phone, you'll see that and you look for a topic, or you look in Google Discover, which is the news feed in Google, the same story doesn't come up many times. If a thing is announced, Google will pick one person for the news box, or 2 or 3, pick one person for the Google Discover feed. And so giving everyone the same thing at the same time is entirely pointless to media. They simply don't care. They will ignore it if they're smart, right? So everyone thinks they'll get the press release out and people will toe the line and meet their embargo and be part of their campaign beats. They just won't. And frequently people talk about, how do I beat spam filters? How can my email reach a journalist? And the answer is, don't send spam is the first tip. Because what you really want to do is not send a press release. You want to send a personalized outreach if you don't have a friend yet. And that would be, you're making a roguelike. You look at make a list of the journalists who've covered roguelikes. And those are your core targets. Not the editor of the brand, not the inbox of the brand you want to talk to, but the actual writers who are covering that exact beat. Often you can look at them on LinkedIn and see what kind of thing they're into, and often you can look at even their Steam profile if it's public, and understand what games they're playing. And then when you reach out, you can say, hey, I noticed you wrote about this roguelike, this one's a bit like it. It's a bit different for this reason. And journalists are lazy, and you want to give them everything possible to make it so they can get started. And that will be, here are 2 quotes from the developer that no one else has used yet. You can have them first. Here are some screenshots that are unique to you, rather than it just being the pictures that were over the web. Here's a link to the video. Always have a video because it's easy to embed. Here's a Steam key. You don't even have to apply for it. I've picked you. Here's a Steam key. Here's my gift to you to go and play it. You write an email like that, and people will look at it. If you send a press release to 100 people going, new game with stunning visuals, people will ignore you. It's an entirely pointless exercise. And so, again, if you take one thing away, it's how to do better outreach. And that segues quite well into the next question I've got for you, Catherine.
Go on, James. I know what it is, but I've forgotten.
Should you hire a PR agency?
Well, it depends. It really depends. Not everybody needs one. And they can be really, really, really expensive. I think the first question has to be, what is it you're actually trying to achieve in your business? Because coverage or buzz, as you often get asked for as a comms person, isn't an objective. Monetizing players, player acquisition, player retention, investment, talent acquisition, those are all objectives. Understanding what your actual business is that you're trying to achieve, and then working out whether or not traditional media has an influence on the audience you're trying to reach is the first question you should ask yourself. If it does, then focus on those media outlets and the PR agencies or the specialists that are already working in that space. What I often see, especially at the moment where there's so much uncertainty and complexity around launching new services or games, people are kind of throwing everything at it. And PR is one of the things that gets thrown into the mix. And you can spend a lot of money getting a lot of great coverage. You'll have an Excel sheet that's like just full of links of like, oh my God, all these Irish and Italian sites that you never even knew existed. But is it actually helping your business? Possibly not. So I think it's like, what are you trying to achieve? Are they specialists in reaching the people that are reaching the people that you need to talk to? And when you do appoint an agency, if you decide you do, and you think it's worth the money, assuming you've got the money, be really, really focused in what you're asking them to do. Otherwise, you can just feel great about buzz and coverage and have just sunk a load of cash where you'd have been better off spending it on like one influencer or something.
And you sort of talked yourself out of work there, Catherine. Yeah.
I'm a consultant. It's totally different to being an agency.
You help hire the PR agencies.
We help hire the PR people to make sure you don't get ripped off. That's us.
Yeah. And then one thing I will say that's good about press releases.
You just said they were terrible.
No, there is one thing, actually, which... can anyone guess what press releases are actually for these days? I'll take a shout from the room. AI. There, I've said it. So what actually happens with press releases now is the AI scrapers love reading them. And they take it for granted that this is true because it's in a press release, especially if it's on a press release website. And we've entered a phase in media called zero-click search. That's where you have a result on top of a Google page that is just the AI summary. And they are populated a lot from press releases and from case studies and stories you can share exactly about your firm. If you say a fact in a press release, the AI will go, oh, brilliant, yeah, I understand that, and that's real. The other thing it will populate is actually just chat on LLMs. So if you're a co-dev studio and you're trying to get some PR, actually the benefit of the press release saying the people you've worked with or how big you are or the projects you're great at, these will actually generate LLM results, even if they don't generate coverage. But you don't really need an agency to help you with that. You just spam the press release onto a PR site.
Actually, so I'm just going to add one more thing on the point about whether or not press releases are any good, and I think we're going back and forth on whether or not we should do them. But the principles that you're talking about in terms of like, it's just spam for media. I think that applies to most Western media and certainly US and European media. In Asia, the media approach is quite different. So if you produce a decent press release, certainly in Japan, Korea, and if you pay a stipend or what have you in China, they will pretty much print up your release verbatim. So I think that approach applies to most Western markets, but it is different in other countries.
Talk about the stipend a bit more.
That goes into the way that Chinese media work, and that's probably a different discussion.
Okay. So you've got some coverage. Your PR agency may have got it, and you've launched the game. And we called this speech after the highs and lows. And we're going to talk about this high of the launch of the game is the thing that most people talk about a lot. But I want you to just talk a little bit about day 2, the morning after the game ships, and the role of communications on day 2 after you've kind of pushed the game out.
It's a really good question, and I've been really, really lucky where I've been at some of the start of some of like the biggest hyped day 1. So I think back to like World of Warcraft, Half-Life 2, Vice City. Having a front row seat on all of those things was fascinating. Apex Legend was just a total takeover of the entire influencer landscape. On the flip side of that, and so all of those businesses were betting really, really hard on day 1, but they also had all of the pockets and the spend to be able to support through day 2, 3, 4, and 5. What is I'm seeing more of now with studios is they are spending really big on day 1, and they don't always have a plan for day 2, partly because it is so critical that their game is successful out the door. They maybe have a month's money. They maybe have 1, 2, or 3 months' money, but beyond that, they don't. And tragically, I've seen studios that don't have a plan after that. And what that plan B looks like is, how are you going to pivot if something is off in your content? How are you going to deal with the technical failure? How are you going to re-energize your community or keep some momentum or keep some visibility for what you're doing, either in media or with influencers or your community? Like, thinking beyond that, especially when you're in crunch, like you just put everything into getting it out the door, you put all the money you've got. Thinking beyond that point is really important. And that point, that plan B or C or D might be pivoting massively to being a work-for-hire studio. It might be something that you don't necessarily want to think about when you're still getting really excited about the game you haven't even shipped yet. But I think considering the different options, especially in a climate that is really uncertain, is not just a nice to have. I don't think it's just essential. I think it's a responsibility if you are leading people and you are in charge of jobs.
Talk about how you drive a consensus in the business for that and how executives can buy in, because obviously they'll be thinking it's going to work, right? And pushing forward and having to create a culture of belief for the game as it's approaching ship. How do you build a consensus across the whole team?
It's a really good question. I think nobody wants to be a naysayer, right? Nobody, and I'm not saying that you go out to your entire team and go, hey, I know you've just spent the last 3 years of your life making this amazing thing, and you put everything you own into it, and you haven't seen your families 4 months, if not years. But what if it doesn't work? What should we do then? Like, I think as a leadership team or a leader, you should have a view on what pivoting really quickly could look like. I think if you're working with a team, that might be a content stream. It might be another partnership. It might be another investor that you've kept warm. It's just a different solution. But I think that's probably something at a leadership level you should be considering, especially in this climate.
Fun fact, on the Apollo 11 moon landing, you might know this, they had a speech written in case it didn't work. So they were sort of ready with the meltdown scenario. Now, it doesn't mean your game isn't going to work, but knowing exactly how your community is going to behave when you do a day 1 discount straight after the people have pre-ordered and paid full price, when your player count hasn't gone up enough and people are just tweeting dead game, when you are confronted with servers where people can't get games, or the other side, when servers blow up too much. All of these things are certain to happen at some point. So therefore, having a playbook, I think, is the trick, right?
Absolutely. And I think there are like some key themes that I see in working with people about what success looks like from a leadership perspective or from a studio perspective, and what failure looks like. And those that are failing are generally because, and not always, right, because this is an impossibly hard landscape around it. It is often that they are repeating the same mistakes and not necessarily able to acknowledge the things they're not great at, not seeking or taking on board counsel, and really doubling down on the things they are good at.
And we're going to get to a more cheerful thing in the
this
second
is
half.
all feeling a bit bleak.
And it's going to get even worse for a minute, though.
Oh.
Obviously, there is the world of layoffs and bad news and game shutdowns. And we've seen that a lot of times recently where people feel a big sense of betrayal and surprise or sort of panic. And could you talk about how you've had to handle those situations a little bit? I've asked Kat's warned me she won't name any individual companies or be very exact because it's as a consultant, but I think you can be. I think you can be a bit. You can open up a little bit, but not say any company.
So I've worked on a number of different mergers and acquisitions and layoffs and studio closures, as well as some great launches and some huge rocket ship success stories. I think the thing that frustrates me most about layoffs is that there is a better way of doing them. There's never a good way of telling somebody they don't have a job anymore, but there is a better way of doing it, and not enough time and energy and thought goes into considering that. And what I guess success looks like from a communications perspective is that the people that are leaving with a really clear view on why it happened. That it was not about them, that it was not about their performance, that it is an unfortunate, difficult business decision. I think it has such a tremendous human impact if it's done wrong. I've been laid off 3 times, and the last time absolutely crushed me because it was handled so badly. And there is a better way of doing it. The other thing is for people that are, and so it's thinking through what are you going to say. Is everyone on board with what you're going to say? Are you actually telling the truth about why you're having to make these redundancies? You know, 3 years ago when you bought this massive studio and you said you were massively all in on mobile, and then 3 years later, like, oh, actually, sorry, that didn't really work out. We're going to have to cut everybody. Like being accountable for the fact that you went all in on a strategy that then resulted in several thousand layoffs or whatever it was. Like you have to own that. And if you don't, what you end up with is a bunch of people that feel that they invested themselves in working for leadership that were not worthy of them, that didn't deserve that hard work. Because everyone in our industry is working really hard, is really committed, and is really passionate. So we're deeply personally invested in the work that we do. So you feel like you wasted your time with these people. But also you feel that they're not accountable. So you have to start with the truth. But from a commercial perspective, so there's a human aspect. Just start with the truth, be respectful, get everybody on board with what you are saying. You know, if your leadership is saying something, but your mid-tier management is saying something different, it's bad for the people that are being laid off because it undermines their confidence. It's like, what's the truth? Was it really that, or was it something I could have done? You know, could I have kept my job? And that's just a horrible spiraling place for someone to be that then has to go out and present them best selves into an industry in this climate to get a new job. So I think think about that, and then commercially, what success looks like coming out of redundancies is a workforce that remains where you have attempted or you've made best efforts to mitigate the guilt of everyone who's still there but perhaps has had to see all of their colleagues go. And then also you don't have, you know, X hundred or X thousand employees going onto Twitter or X or any other platform saying they're lying, they did this, these are awful people, because actually everyone's like, this was bad, I'm not happy about it, but like I understand why it happened and I understand that it had to happen. And there are definitely examples where I've worked on bodies of work where large studios have closed, where we haven't seen that outpouring because we've spent a long time thinking about the work and pushing leadership to be accountable for what they said and what was wrong in their strategy that led to those decisions, and having everyone on board with the position the company is taking. And even I've seen positive media narratives out of those because the player benefit or the longer term benefit has been seen. So I think step one is like the human impact of it. Like you can't underestimate how catastrophic that can be for people. And so putting a bit of time, more than, you know, half an hour an afternoon into thinking about it, bringing in an expert if you can. And even if you can't afford an expert, the chances are that if you went to any reputable communications expert in our industry and said, I'm doing layoffs, I have no money for it, will you help me pro bono? I would be very surprised if anybody didn't take that call and didn't take that work and didn't offer to support you for free to get you through this situation? Sorry, I feel really strongly about it, James.
Yeah. I think one of the, I've been laid off and I've done layoffs. And I think one of the things I would love you all to take away about it is how infrequently it is the actions of the individual that gets laid off that has caused the situation. Right? Now, there's a word for when you get laid off and it's your fault. That word is fired. And Americans tend to say the word fired when they've been laid off. And fired relates to direct performance. Right? And almost everything about making games is so wildly collaborative. There's so many people, there are so many factors trying to sort of bottle magic. Companies will put individuals under pressure to make them believe they are personally accountable for the output, the success of the project or not. When actually the truth is, individuals are responsible for their inputs. And I believe strongly that in the event of having to make a layoff, celebrate the inputs of the person in the project. And personally, you need to get a very clear vision of your inputs into it, because that way you can protect your self-esteem. And you can understand that it isn't necessarily your inputs, because if it was, you'd just be fired rather than laid off. It's the project. And I think that's a really important thing to remember in all of this. I'm going to make it more cheerful now.
I was going to say, that was a lot of lows.
Yeah, sorry.
A little bit in between. Let's get to the highs.
I'm going to talk about building expectation for the game. So you have communications and you're talking in the market. What's your belief about how you build expectation relative to the point the game is in the life cycle?
That's a really good one, actually, because especially now you can go out with an amazing trailer that looks like your game is AAA and pretty much done 2 years in advance of launch. And so setting expectations about where it is now, especially when things can change that far out, is really important. I think most media in particular, in fact, are used to seeing things at early stages and as they progress. But yeah, making sure that whatever you're putting out is actually authentic. It goes back to that piece about talking about the truth. Make sure you're representing your creative vision, your technical capabilities, and your ambitions accurately as of where they are now.
I implore you all to watch the game trailer made by Introversion for their game Prison Architect. They were marketing the beta, and the voiceover said, it's the beta, it's definitely the beta. And in the game, they said, look at this guy, he's walked into a wall. And they said, look at this guy in the dining room, he's on fire, nobody's noticed. And they turned the early stage facts about the game into a proper narrative. There's a company called Reforge, 4J Studios right now making a game called Reforge. We do some work for them. And they've called their beta program Pioneers, so that people know what they are getting into, rather than thinking they're arriving with a fully finished game. And all of this is, if you can give people what they expect, then they are happy. If you give people a little bit more than they expect, they're delighted. If you go a millimeter below what they expect, they are thumbs down, and they are negative reviews. The other thing I've observed recently, smart people are doing, is calling their early versions of the game a different SKU on Steam. So Arc Raiders had Arc Raiders playtest, and that could be the magnet for all the feedback and scores up and down, and then they launched the full game and they called it Arc Raiders. Because what's happened historically is people are sort of dragging along. It looks like it's an old game with loads and loads of reviews, ups and downs, and loads of comments versus a clean start. And I feel very strongly that the idea of the clean start the day you ship your finished version is the trick on Steam. So yeah, so always do the playtest and celebrate your clunkiness early on. We've got plenty of time left, and actually I want to open the floor for any questions before we go into go into any more detail, because I'm sure there are some questions, and we're giving free consultancy here. So who wants to go first with a question?
You can raise your hand if you want to ask something, and my colleague will reach you with the microphone. Oh.
Everyone's just so sad about we didn't get to enough of the highs.
You're covering a lot of topics, and you cover it pretty good, let's say. So maybe that's the reason why there are not so many questions so far.
What other gems of advice have we got, James?
But maybe I can ask just a short question.
Yeah.
Maybe you can tell how important the vertical communication in the team. Maybe it's more relevant for big teams, of course, not for like small indie teams with 5 people. But I think maybe sometimes just juniors, maybe okay, not juniors, but some developers who are doing like the main stuff, not really sure what's happening or planning the tops and how to manage these things. Is it need to be manageable or yeah?
No, it's a good question, and it's an important point. There are generally kind of 3 things to think about when you're talking about employee communications, and these are sort of 3 employee need states. Is 1, how do I get what I need to do my job? Like where do I get the information about like finding stationery or the nearest great sandwich? 2, how do I find my people within a company? How are the other people that love? Where are the other people that love Goat Simulator still or cat memes? And then how do I connect to leadership? And everyone needs to, especially in a creative industry, everyone needs to understand what the vision is and buy into it. Also, if you want people to be their best selves, if you want them to innovate, if you want them to be creative, giving them a North Star and an understanding of where you are ultimately going as a leadership, as a game, as a project, as a studio, as a service, and what you are all reaching for, enables them to find their own path to it. And with that, you will see you create more space for diversity of thought, more space for creativity, and you enable people to feel more ownership and more investment in it. And one of the things that we see, particularly in mid-sized studios, there's a bunch of research that over about 100 people is where you start to lose culture and where things start to get difficult. But spending some time thinking about this, like how everyone, even the people that are within your office environment, service providers or the person answering your phones, how everyone is connected to the business because they are all part of your culture. It's really important. I say that as someone who has worked on leadership teams, but James, you're absolutely running your own show, your own business. What are your thoughts on it?
I'm going to talk about survivor bias for a second, which means you should be very careful taking advice from anyone. Generally, there's I'm going to name another conference, sorry, DevGAMM, the GDC speech effect. Someone has game hit and gets invited to speak at a conference about that game hit. And they'll talk about how they were just authentic on X and their Twitter and their game worked. And I think that one of the challenges we have when we look to strong examples in the market is the idea that really there's a magic alchemy in the games that worked. And when people say they just want more Balatros, right, that's the thing that people are saying, right? Could we just not do a Balatro, right? The problem with that theory is, let's imagine that Balatro cost $1 million to create, market, QA, put on the store, right? And it's probably about right. You think about it, it was one guy, but they had a lot of production support, and PlayStacks did a load of work on it. Let's say it cost $1 million. Now, if there were 99 other games a bit like Balatro that didn't work, that also cost about $1 million, then the total cost to make Balatro wasn't $1 million. It was $100 million. So if you think about it being a hit indie game in the range of indie games, right, it's actually a very expensive game to make versus a sort of mid-core bet, because you can't be sure by spending this $1 million you're going to get it. So I think that's the first point. So be careful who you're taking advice from, because the GD speech thing. I'm going to take it to this vertical of people. I'm going to talk about time instead for a second. So the idea of when you start thinking about the communication strategy for your game, and the favorite thing that we get, and that my friends who are PR agencies get, and my friends who are marketing agencies get, is about 4 weeks before people are due to ship a game, they phone a marketing agency or a PR agency or try and hire someone to help them. And clearly that's a bit late. Also, then the first question, they'll ask a bunch of questions about, well, what games are you trying to target? What genre is it? What other games you most like? What's the strategy? And mostly the people that we talk to don't necessarily have a strong handle on it. What they made is a game that they were passionate about. And Balatro stands out. They had a clear plan, make a roguelike poker type game, and great. But generally people don't have. So the idea that people have to start a lot earlier engaging with product market fit, even if they're a very small indie, is important. And then also understanding that they'll have to spend some money at the very end. Steam is not, and everyone in this room should know this, and I'm going to repeat it, it bears repeating. Steam will only help you with discovery when you're already getting momentum. Steam is really good at that. At the point where you start getting a load of wish lists, and you start getting a load of followers, and people start commenting on it, and a few people pre-order it, that's the point where Steam goes, oh, there's something here. So Steam has all the games and can look. An indie publisher is having to do something magic. They're trying to pick a winner. And that is very hard. All that Steam has to do is back a winner. So what you need to be trying to do is create signals for Steam to help them back the winner. Yeah, that's just, I'm ranting about that, really.
Absolutely nothing to do with employee communications,
no, sorry,
but incredibly valuable for the room, I think.
Any questions in the room yet? We have a question. Go on. Oh, he's coming up to the mic. He's coming on the stage.
All right, so you're trapped. How you doing?
Hi.
Awesome talk, by the way. You're trapped in a train with two people in their early 20s, and then discover that they're making a game. Let's say it's a fighting game. They've got like 30 people in their Discord. You know, they're doing great. They got like 6 likes on their last post on X. They're launching in a year. What's your advice to them to go from being passionate fighting game people to passionate fighting game people with a game that's going to sell 10,000 units?
Do you want to go first?
Shall I go first?
You go first.
Did you say they had a Discord yet? Get a Discord,
people on it.
cultivate some super fans straight away. Make those first few fans feel like they're insiders. And don't listen to anyone else about their game design. They clearly are super passionate and know what they're doing. I'm not a game producer, so I can't help them with that. I think that the journey is long, and I think that having a bunch of people with them that are their super fans is the thing that will keep them motivated. I think probably encourage them to get a game engine, use a game engine rather than try and code everything from scratch unless they're coding geniuses. Ask them which one they've got. Encourage them to take advantage of all the tools and services and training resources they've got. Encourage them. So these two people, they're probably both devs. The problem with devs is they are clever. Slightly too clever, because they will not necessarily seek advice or necessarily respect some of the disciplines, the softer disciplines like marketing and PR. So they would probably have to make some friends that also have that discipline. I feel strongly about our colleges, where when they have a game design course, they do not do a good enough job connecting the people on the game design course with the people on the marketing course. You know, because they won't necessarily know, but the people on the marketing course, their friends who know about PR and marketing, can't program in C#. They can't do that job. So I think know their lane and recruit. So recruit some super fans, talk to them all the way through, and find friends that have some connection to PR and marketing. And trickle through assets, but don't ever say what the release date is going to be, because that will slip.
At this point, they haven't really got an audience for that, right?
They've got 6 followers on Twitter. They got them followers.
Twitter. Yeah, no, I think, and I guess my point is probably, it's more of the same. It's like broadening out that community. How do you find the evangelists, right? So if you're that hard into fighting games that you've built your own fighting games, what are the games? What are the media that inspire you? What are those communities looking for? How can you, what are the communities that you're already in, right? Going into a community and going, I've got a fighting game. Hi, you've never seen me before. You've never heard from me before, but I'm going to try and hard sell you on my new fighting game. If you're that much into a genre, where are you already talking to people that love the thing that you love, that might also love the thing that you're pouring your heart into? And like, how can you kind of spiderweb, like build out your community from that, but authentically? Like I said, just jumping into fresh spaces and trying to sell people is really going to turn off a lot of potential people that might otherwise love it. And then, yeah, James, your point about a lot of the work that we get asked to do is around mentorship programs. And anyone who asks me about, like, how do I get into the games industry? How do I become a games journalist? Like, how do I do any of that stuff? stuff. Looking at your peer set of who else loves games, who else is making games, finding people that have different skill sets to you, banding together, and in the same way that we would say to someone who was studying programming and starting to get a game jams and build their own games, like find those peer roles around you that can also help like promote your game. And it's a really good showcase for everyone involved to be able to then go into a job interview or then go into industry and say, hey, I worked on this game, it was an indie project. So kind of everyone's a winner and everyone gets to benefit from it. So I guess we're saying the same thing, but it's about like micro communities, like building evangelism, building a network. And then also, I said it before about the pro bono, reaching out to people. My experience of the games industry is it's generally pretty kind and people are quite generous with their time. And I think there's no shame in saying, who do you love? Like, who do you respect in the world of making games? Send them a message and say, hey, I'm doing this thing. It's my everything. Can you give me like 5 minutes on the phone? Or can you give me 2 tips? Or can you ask them a really direct question? You made this in this game. I loved it. How did you communicate it? And I'd be surprised if they didn't get at least a chunk of responses back. And maybe some advocates, maybe some people in really senior positions that would look at their game and love it too. I think it's put it out there and be brave about asking for help from the industry.
Bonus round.
It
just being a fighting game isn't enough. I think if it's a fighting game with dogs, or a fighting game with robots, or a fighting game with magic spells, or a fighting game meets Stardew Valley, I think that they need a thing that elevates it and makes it different, because people are sated with fighting games, so it will need to be something else as well. And understanding that is going to be the reason why, ultimately, if they ship the game, is why people will play it on Twitch. Because it'll be, look at this dog fighting this. Don't make a dog fighting game. Look at this robot fighting this robot. Isn't it funny how he rips his head off and the wires come out? I think they need to find some marketing truth that they can tell about their game that will make it go, oh, that's the robot fighting game, and people understand it. If it's just a fighting game, there's enough of them. And if they try and make it too close to Street Fighter, we've already got Street Fighter. And the question that I often ask people when they come to me with for marketing plans is, if we're trying to get someone to shift from one fighting game to another, or one MMO to another, or one battle royale to another, the question you should ask people is, how often do you change your bank account? Because people infrequently change their bank account. So if we're saying learn an entirely new meta, play a game where your friends aren't, learn this new law, there's so much friction to get started. I think we have 30 seconds for one more question. We're keeping you from coffee. Anyone else want any more? Oh, one at the back.
Hi there. Great talk. Appreciate all the answers. I have one question further to the fighting example. What do you see as the ideal timeline for a campaign of reaching out to consumers? Any ideas or thoughts on that? Too long, too short?
I think it really depends on the genre, the audience, and how deep your pockets are. I've worked on campaigns that for big games that have been a year out, for indie games, like startups that have been a year out. I've also worked on games that have been totally dark and out the door straight away with a massive bang, huge marketing investment, and hands-on before anything else is seen. I don't think there's a simple answer to it. I think you want to start thinking about it as far out as you can, to the example of the fighting game. If you have some ridiculously crazy robot dog fighting game that looks hilarious, Goat Simulator did a fantastic job of endemic marketing, right? So they thought about that early enough to actually program a mechanic into the game where you could capture this video, which then, when they came to launch, meant that it went viral. So I think start thinking about it from day one. When you start actioning it, I would take advice on.
Also think about why you want to talk to them. Do you want them to wishlist it? Do you want them to join your Discord? If you want them to join your Discord, are you committed to talking to them in your Discord? I think sometimes people go too soon, and it feels like at the release date, it's been out for ages, and people miss their moment. And I think So I think it's a gradual thing. Now, the neat thing about having a one-to-one communication strategy is you're not actually announcing your game. You're not going to everyone. You're engaging with someone super early, and they're flattered that they'll be the first people that ever see it. And if they hate it, you can pivot a little bit, or you can work out what you're doing. So I think start early on a unit of audience of one, and grind it out. I would say day zero, register every social media account you're ever going to want, every name on every platform, and put a thing saying coming soon, just to make sure. Because as soon as there's a whiff of your game name, you'll realize you forgot to register the Discord username, and you'll be sad. So that's the job you have to do on day zero, at least. But if you are building community, you have to be able to believe that you're going to give them a trickle of assets. And if you're not ready for that yet, then don't start, because they'll forget. They forget they followed it. They'll forget they wishlisted it. Wishlist is such a light commitment. Yeah. Oh, there's one more. Can we take one more? Is that all right?
Yeah, we have time.
Yeah,
Don't
great.
worry.
Yeah. We might even have two. Who knows?
Hello, I'm in PR, so I actually have a ton of questions. But
Oh, no.
No,
Sorry about your
I'll-
agency.
I'll come
We
back.
can always chat later.
Yes, exactly. But I guess my top one for now is how do you balance the needs of the site and obviously the demands of like SEO and all of that stuff, and therefore focusing on covering triple A's. How do you balance those needs with the desire to cover indies, which from my relationships with journalists, I know you want to do, but of course it's a challenge. So how do you balance that?
PCGamesN.com covers more indies than anyone else. And we love covering indies. And there's a very particular reason. And I'll tell you this, and you'll see it everywhere now. The easiest thing in the world for a journalist is to compare a game to two other games. This is Subnautica meets Stardew Valley with a twist you won't believe, is a headline you'll see. Now, they've withheld the game name so that people click through. And they've, in Google Discover, which is the way most content is read now, they'll rank for people who are looking up stories around Subnautica and Stardew Valley. So first of all, comparing games to others is one of the tricks. Secondly, making it really easy for busy journalists. And I mentioned this earlier, but they are, if you send them unique quotes, unique screenshots, and a video they can embed, you've done a lot of the work for them. If two stories have the same image, Google will devalue that story. It likes it less. So, and I think there are probably only 10 sites really that are any use for indie coverage. I'm delighted that PC Games N is one of them, but there's about 10 that really, if it's an indie game, that are going to move the needle for you enough. So you can laser focus your efforts on those. I wouldn't bother with the editors. They're really busy and their inbox is rammed. I think, and also I think that the benefit of getting one good story away is everyone else follows. So if you can get a story on a Rock, Paper, Shotgun, all the other journalists will be all like, oh, it's on there, it must be significant, and they may well follow. So I think go with the genre comparison, the other games comparison, and introduce the journalist to that early in your press release or your outbound contact. I think I have a folder in my Gmail account called Daily Review, and it's got 130,000 emails I haven't opened in it. I have not honored my commitment to Daily Review when I set up that filter a few years ago. And there are certain PR people who are just in that folder now because they abused their personal email account. They sent a bunch of spam from it of 5 press releases a day, and it wasn't an email, it was a broadcast tool. And email is not a broadcast tool, so they're just lost forever in that folder. And so if you want it to not be in the spam folder, not be in the daily review folder, I think being very careful with that. The other bit is, it drives journalists mad when a press release is sent and 10 minutes later there's a phone call saying, did you get the press release? Did you get it? Did you get it? And the pestering. I think you've got to be careful how you're seen to be pushy, but I know you do want to be pushy. So yeah, does that help? Is that some answer?
Yeah, for sure. Also, thank you to the PC Games N team for covering my stuff so regularly. I did an X meets Y comparison like last week. It was Subnautica meets Rust, and you guys covered it. So
Yeah, we fell for it. Amazing.
Yes. So thank you.
Kat, have you got any advice on this?
Congratulations. Pick your battles and pick your media, right? Like, pick the right outlets, pick the right journalist. It might be a freelancer rather than somebody that's on staff. And to James's point, go personal. I don't send a lot of emails. And when I do send them, I make sure they are really, really considered, are high value, are conscious that I need to be bringing something to the table and respectful of somebody's time. Also, flattery goes a really long way. You know, anytime you meet a journalist or you are somebody you want to cover your indie game, or you're reading an article, you know, going out there with that thing you wrote 6 months ago about, I don't know, Outgraders or whatever it was, absolutely loved it. And your critique of whatever in 2008 was inspired. They're just like everybody else. You'll hook them in with a bit of flattery and like, you're interested, you've read my copy. But in all seriousness, actually, reading people's copy, reading people's articles, and knowing that they are the right person to write about your dog robot fighting game or whatever it is probably one of the easiest ones.
And it plays to the emotional world we live in right now. Many teams are remote, and what people most want is to be seen. And I think if you can show in your communication strategy that you see people, you see their work, and it's not a autofill spam email. You know, I think we live in I used the word AI once, so I'll use it one more time. We live in a world where sort of AI slop is everywhere, and trying to elevate our journalist content and your work above that means we've all got to turn up as humans. And I think if we do that, we win. What a bombshell to end on. Unless there's any more questions. We
we have
we've got 7 minutes.
Don't worry.
You're going to help us, yeah.
I'm checking, yeah. So.
Go on, we have one more. Anyone?
Maybe I can ask something, but I'm not sure you can cover it fast. Maybe you can tell a few words about, let's call it damage covering or minimizing the damage when something went wrong after
Crisis
launch.
communications.
Yeah, kind of. I'm mostly talking about some, I don't know, like servers are crashed after the release and you need to communicate within the team on a Christmas weekend, for example, or also with the players and maybe sometimes press, depends. Maybe you can just...
So situation is a mass technical fail. Privacy, data breach.
For example.
Some kind of geopolitical issue,
something that
shut down in a
happens
sensitive
already.
country, all that kind of jazz. First of all, wait. Understand exactly what's going on. Like, what's causing the technical failure? If you can't find that out really quickly, at least gather the right people in the room to get as much accurate information about what you can do. If your community is blowing up, it may be that your best response is to acknowledge them, to know that there is an issue and that you are looking into what's causing it. Don't commit to a timeline that you absolutely can't be sure of and that everyone in the room is on board with delivering. And then consider whether there are, beyond your core community, whether there are other partners that you should be talking to. So, you know, have you got other service providers? Have you got other tech partners? Other people that might be impacted? Have you got a brand partner? Have you got an IP in your game who might then be getting a bunch of heat? How are you thinking about the other people that might also be on the receiving end of the same disgruntled players? So I think it's take a beat, get everybody together to find out exactly what's going on. If it's appropriate and you can't immediately fix it, put out some kind of holding statement, and then be careful about what you commit to, and where you can, provide substantive updates to people as you go along, and make sure anyone else who might come out the woodwork, who could comment on this, is on board with what your plan and understands what you're saying when, why, and so you don't end up with other people coming in with bits of messaging that might be misleading.
And I think these dreadful things that people write about you on social media when something goes wrong with your game, that's a sign of love. Why would they feel so strongly about the game if they didn't love the game? You know,
if no one noticed, that's bad.
I think we can sort of wear ourselves out reading feedback, but this is someone who's bothered to actually open. I'm going to complain and type a thing about this. You know, that's not from a start point of apathy. That's a start point of a commitment. So I think trying to communicate with people, but know also that no matter how mean the comments are, it's
Yeah,
a
I mean,
young
probably-
boy in his pants who really is frustrated he can't play the game, and I think that is raging, and I think it's just noise.
I think that's a good point. Like the human impact of it, right? People invest so much. Players invest so much of themselves into nurturing gaming communities and their position and time in particular franchises. And I've worked in games that have really hyper sort of sensitive, strong ownership. Kind of a lot of the MMO communities are incredibly vocal and can lean towards toxic, but recognizing that some people will feel this very deeply and very emotionally, and that's what's perhaps prompting like an angry toddler response that's raging across your community, and that the response to that is not to be another person going, we're trying our best, we're really sorry, we know, like panicking it, but more taking a sort of an adult step back position on it, but recognizing that they're feeling it really deeply, and it does feel like the end of the world for them.
If anybody wants to see this happening in real time, go and have a look at the Football Manager 26 reviews on Steam. Oh, those fans, they don't like it.
Not happy. Waited a year.
It's rough for Sega right now, Sports Interactive, because they've evolved a thing that people were very familiar with, and these fans love to hate at the moment. Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, give him a mic. You having a go at Football Manager?
The Borderlands example recently was one that totally blew out of proportion with reviews and developers commenting, and it got kind of ugly. So,
Randy Pitchford should take X off his phone. I think is the action point there for Gearbox. Yeah, I think again, it's so easy to be drawn in and pick a fight. But if it's a server status thing, they're frustrated they can't play the game. Yeah, and I think also the other bit, we said this earlier, but it is going to happen. Bad things are going to happen to you, and that is certain that bad things will happen. And I think, therefore, having a communication plan ahead of time, if you're big enough to have a structure that can build that, is the trick. So you're not surprised when the servers fall over in the weekend, or something breaks, or the patch update needs to be rolled back. This just happens all the time.
Yeah, I think the other thing is thinking about, is it helpful for you to respond? You might be right in what you're saying, but is it actually helping the situation? Does it make it any better? Does it make your own position, the position of your employees, the position of your game, of your players, does it improve that? Or is it just a platform for you to respond emotionally because you're right and they're not? It's not, just because you're right, it's not always helpful to tell people these things.
Do you have statistics how many CEOs consult their peer managers before writing in Twitter?
Sorry, what was that? How many?
Do we have statistics how many % of CEOs consulting their peer manager before writing in Twitter?
100% of the ones Catherine's told off before.
So it's interesting. Do you know what? It's the smaller ones that kind of like, oh no, I know you've been doing this well, but you've only been doing this at big studios. I know better. The likes of Chris Bruzzo, Andrew Wilson, they're literally, checking. I was at a dinner recently with a AAA client that I've got who is working on a particularly sensitive issue, and they were asked about this sensitive issue at an industry table, and I could just see the sort of side eye of them looking at whether I was looking at them as every time they opened their mouth, and they're kind of like, oh, it's all right, yeah.
That, yeah.
But yeah, it's and that's the thing. It's right. I wouldn't try and code something. I wouldn't try and be an expert in any other field outside my own in video games, and there is a reason why you have people that are really good at this, because they can really get you out of trouble. They can stop trouble coming your way, and they can really, really help not just your game or your brand or your studio, but yourself. They can help you, and they can help your people.
There's an aphorism which is that the plural of anecdote is not data. And we can apply that to comments as well. The plural of comments is not data. You may have 20,000 players and 20 that are pointing out a thing. And the question is, if you fix that thing for those 20 players, will they change? And I think Ubisoft confronted this a bit, where there's all these people complaining they don't like Ubisoft games. And the answer is they shouldn't buy them. I think that they can move on, and Ubisoft's going to sell plenty more games. Hey, there's one more thing. Robot Fighting Guy, before you go, there's one more thing I wanted to say to those people on the train. Sorry, I'm not letting you out. The other thing you want to say to the two people on the train is, well done, you're doing it. Everyone's got an idea for a game. Everyone's got an idea for a website. The first question we ask people when we interview them for writing jobs in my business is, where are you writing right now? And if they're not writing at the moment, they don't qualify because they're not doing it. They're not writing on Reddit. They haven't got their own fan blog. And these two people you met on the train, they're making a game. So start with a celebration of that rather than talking about it. So long as they are making it, not just talking about it. That's it.
Okay, thank you very much for interesting chat.
Thanks, friends.
Thanks for having us.